By dawn, they found him face down in the saloon, his throat slit clean, his badge missing. The piano was still playing, a single note caught between life and death. The only footprints in the dust were made by a woman's boots. They said the West was tamed by bullets and blood, but they never tell you who really pulled the trigger. The history books will say a drunk drifter did it, a nameless outlaw passing through. But the old folks, the ones who still remember the smell of gunpowder in the wind, they tell a different story. They whisper about her. The wind still carries her name, a name the town buried beneath prayer and whiskey, a name carved once into a gravestone that no longer stands. They said she came from the border country, where the sun bled into the sand and mercy was just another lie. Some called her a sinner, others called her a saint, but every man who crossed her path ended up whispering her name to the dirt before he died. They said she never missed a shot, but it wasn't her aim they feared, it was her silence, the kind that hung in the air after the gunfire stopped. When justice had already been decided, they found her shadow in every ghost town west of the divide, in saloons that burned to the ground, in graves dug too shallow, in the stories mothers told their sons when they grew too proud. She was the echo that never faded, the reckoning no one prayed for but everyone knew was coming. Some said she'd been wrong, taken, husband taken, a home stolen by the kind of men who made laws with their guns. Others swore she was a bounty hunter, cleaning up the sins the sheriffs were too afraid to face. But whatever she was, she left behind a trail that didn't end with her death. They say one night, years later, a group of ranch hands saw her riding along the ridge under a blood-red moon, her hat pulled low, her duster torn, the wind tugging at her hair. They swore she looked right at them, before fading into the storm. Come morning, one of them was found dead, eyes open, hand clutching a silver ring. No one speaks her name now, the churches don't, the sheriffs won't, but the wind remembers. It carries her story through the canyons, and over the bones of men who thought they ruled the West. They thought they buried her legend, but some stories don't stay dead. Some dig their way back through the dirt, one whisper at a time. Tonight, we dig into the forgotten women who didn't just survive the Wild West, they ruled it with secrets deadlier than any six-shooter. And if you're still listening, then hear this. Don't ride off without subscribing. The ones who do always come back, haunted by the stories they missed. The West keeps her secrets close, and those who turn away end up in the comments, wondering why they didn't join the ride when they had the chance. Subscribe now, before the dust settles over your name too. The town still stands, what's left of it. A few rotted beams, a water trough cracked and dry, the saloon leaning like an old drunk that's forgotten how to fall. The doors are gone, but the chairs still face the entrance, waiting for someone who'll never walk through again. The paint on the sheriff's office peeled away decades ago, and beneath it, the faint outline of a handprint remains, too small to belong to a man. Once, this place had another name, but time buried it along with the people who lived here. It wasn't the desert that killed it, it was something older, something quieter, the kind of curse that doesn't come from a witch, but from the weight of truth no one dared to speak. The mines dried up, the railroads shifted course, and then the people started vanishing. Some say they packed up and left when the gold ran thin. Others say they heard her voice calling them into the dark, soft, patient, impossible to ignore. By the time anyone went looking, only their shadows remained, burned into the walls like warnings. They said she used to live at the edge of the valley, in a ranch swallowed now by sand. Her name's been erased from records, but not from the dust. Her story moves like smoke, never caught, never gone. They say she came here a widow, carrying a revolver and a ring that wasn't hers. For a time, she ran the saloon, played cards with men who thought her harmless, listened to their secrets, and learned exactly what kind of justice they deserved. One by one, the men who'd wronged her turned up dead, not shot, not hanged, just gone. The ground opened, and it never gave them back. And still, the women of the town stayed close to her. They worked, they drank, they buried their dead, and they whispered her name like a prayer and a curse. Years later, when the last preacher rode through, he said he felt the land breathing, said the silence pressed against his chest like it wanted him to confess something. He left before sundown and never came back. No one blamed him, no one does. Across the frontier, they still tell stories of women like her, women who built towns by day and buried their enemies by night. They weren't saints, they were survivors, the kind who stitched their own laws out of vengeance and grief. Some hid behind false names, some vanished into the mountains, but the dirt always remembers. The men who came after tried to wash their stories away. They rewrote the history, called the violence the work of God or chance, but the truth never dies, it just waits for someone brave enough to listen. So when the wind moves through these empty streets, and the saloon doors creak for no reason, people don't call it ghosts, they call it memory. The land remembering the women who refused to kneel, the women who carved their names into the bones of the West, even when the world tried to erase them. And so the question still hangs over this place, carried on every gust of dust and thunder. Was it a curse that killed this town? or just the weight of old sins, refusing to stay buried. And if you're still listening, you've already felt it, the pull of the story, the whisper in the wind that says don't look away, don't write off without subscribing. The ones who do always come back, searching the comments for answers they can't find. The West keeps her secrets close, and those who turn away become part of them. Subscribe now, before the dust remembers your name too. And if you're still listening, you've already felt it, the pull of the story, the whisper in the wind that says don't look away, don't write off without subscribing. The ones who do always come back, searching the comments for answers they can't find. The West keeps her secrets close, and those who turn away become part of them. Subscribe now, before the dust remembers your name too. They say the town rose from nothing but dust and hunger, a cluster of tents pitched beside a dying creek, built by men chasing gold and by women who didn't have the luxury of dreams. No one planned for it to last. The miners just wanted a place to drink, the traders a place to cheat, and the rest a place to forget where they'd come from. But out of the dust, it took shape, a church, a post, a row of wooden fronts pretending to be civilization. The records call it progress. The truth was desperation. Every board hammered here came from someone else's land, someone else's sweat. The native soil was taken by promise, then by pistol. When the first drought hit, the preachers said it was a test. When the second came, the people stopped praying. The railroad was supposed to save them. They staked their hopes on the steel lines crawling west, believing salvation came with the sound of engines. But the company's maps were lies drawn in ink and greed. The tracks stopped 20 miles short, and the investors disappeared, along with half the town's fortune. The rest stayed behind, shackled by dust and debt. That's when she arrived. No one remembers her name, only that she rode in at dusk, leading a mule and dragging a coffin behind her. She said nothing for days, just buried the box herself, and built a home near the ridge where the creek once ran. The men called her the widow, because it made them feel safer, as if her silence had a story they could explain. Some said she was the wife of a miner lost to the cave and that swallowed 50 men. Others swore she'd been a rancher's daughter, whose land was stolen by surveyors, her family left to die when the water rights changed hands. And there were darker whispers too, that she'd been the outlaw's bride, the one who betrayed her gang to the law, and walked away with the gold they never found. Whatever her truth was, she didn't beg, didn't smile, didn't kneel. She worked like she meant to outlast the land itself. When the others spoke of leaving, she stayed. When they stole from her, she took it back. When the saloon owner raised his hand, he woke up 3 teeth lighter and never tried again. And somehow, the town changed around her. The women stopped asking permission. The men stopped calling her names they couldn't finish. The drought broke for a season, the wells filled again, and for a brief time, the place almost felt alive. But balance never lasts long out here. A rancher from the north came down with papers claiming ownership of the land she lived on. Said the deed proved it. Said she was trespassing. No one remembers what happened next, only that the rancher's men rode out one morning, and by sundown, their horses came back alone. The preacher said justice would come for her, but justice never rode in. The town went quiet after that. Work slowed, tempers flared, and folks began to vanish, one by one, as if the land was reclaiming what it was owed. There were those who tried to leave, but their wagons broke before the first ridge. Others stayed, waiting for answers that never came. And through it all, she remained, untouched, unbothered, a shadow in the doorway, a flicker in the lamplight. The historians still argue about her. Some say she was real, others call her a legend stitched together from guilt and ghost stories. But every record, every birth, every death, every deed, seems to pass through her name before fading from the books. It's as if she isn't just part of the story. She is the story, the thread holding every secret, every sin, every whispered lie this land ever buried. And maybe that's why nothing grows here anymore. Maybe the earth remembers who built it and who broke it. It began with a letter folded neat, sealed in wax, left on the bar counter one morning before sunrise. No one saw who placed it there, but the handwriting was clean, deliberate. It was addressed to the sheriff, though by the time he read it, his hands were already shaking. The message was short: you took what wasn't yours. Tonight, I'll take it back. He never made it to sundown. They found him behind the saloon, throat cut clean, badge missing, his boots pointed toward her house at the ridge. No footprints, no struggle, just wind and blood. Some said it was her, others said it was justice. Then came the banker's wife, gone before dawn, her jewelry box open, the pearls laid out in a circle on the floor. The preacher called it witchcraft, the blacksmith called it revenge, but the truth sat heavier than either word. No one trusted anyone anymore. Doors that used to stay open were now barred before dark. Every whisper carried her name. Men started watching the ridge. They claimed they saw her lantern flicker at night, even when the wind shoulder snuffed it out. The bravest among them rode out once, 3 of them, rifles ready. Only one came back, white as salt and half mad. He never spoke again, except to mumble one thing over and over: she was waiting for us. The town began to eat itself after that. Neighbors turned on each other, accusing anyone who'd ever spoken to her. The preacher led a prayer circle that turned into a mob. They set fire to her house at midnight, but when the flames cleared, the structure stood untouched. No ash, no scorch marks, no proof it had ever burned. By morning, the preacher's bell was ringing by itself, tolling for someone who hadn't yet died. Fear changed the air. The mines went silent. The saloon closed its doors, and even the wind stopped crossing the valley. Yet her presence grew, like the land itself was breathing through her. Some say the curse began then, others say it ended. But either way, the story had already written itself in blood and smoke. Every wrong, every theft, every betrayal found its way back to its owner. The earth doesn't forget, the dead don't forgive. And she, whatever she was, made sure of that. Now the old folks still whisper about her, voice trembling, eyes darting toward the ridge when they do. They tell the children not to dig in the dirt there, not to pick up any coin that glints in the dust, because every piece of gold, every rusted nail, every remnant of what was built here carries her memory. And memories, once disturbed, tend to wake what should be stayed sleeping. You've listened this far, haven't you? Felt it, that unease in your chest, that whisper at the back of your mind, wondering if she's still out there, listening to. If you believe stories like this should stay buried, don't subscribe. Leave now. Pretend none of this ever reached you. But if you've got the courage to dig deeper, to see how far her story really goes, hit that subscribe button before she decides you already belong to it. And for those who won't go on, step into the comments. Tell the rest of us why you didn't. Just know the land remembers. And so does she. They say she finally found her justice. Or maybe her vengeance. Maybe they're the same thing. You've come this far. You felt her story crawl under your skin, whispering from the dust. Don't make the same mistake they did. Don't turn away now. Hit subscribe before her name finds you in the dark, before the wind starts calling it outside your window. And if you won't, if you think you can walk away untouched, go on. Drop into the comments. Tell the rest of us why you didn't. Just remember, every story like this begins with someone who thought they were safe, and ends with someone who wasn't. The truth didn't come with thunder. It came quiet, like the sound of dirt settling over a coffin. Years later, when the town had been swallowed by sand and silence, a prospector found what was left of her home beneath the ridge. The walls were still standing, though time had stripped them bare. Inside, under the floorboards, he found a box wrapped in oilcloth. Inside were deeds, letters, and a wedding band blackened by fire. The deeds were written in another name, his name, the sheriff's. Every signature, every claim, every stolen acre traced back to the night her husband disappeared. The same night the sheriff rose to power. The letters told the rest. Her husband had gone to confront the sheriff, to demand justice for land that was never for sale. He never made it home. The sheriff took everything, his ranch, his title, even his widow. 4 years, she played her part, the quiet saloonkeeper, the woman with no past. But the letters showed she'd known from the start. Every drink she poured, every man she smiled at, every rumor she fed into the dark, it was all a noose she'd been tying one thread at a time. The sheriff's death wasn't a curse. It was a reckoning she'd written in blood and patience. The fires, the vanishings, the whispers of her name in the wind, they weren't magic. They were fear. They were guilt taking shape in the minds of men who'd all had a hand in what was stolen. But here's the part no one tells. There were 2 sets of footprints the night the sheriff died. One smaller, one dragging, like someone wounded. The prospector followed them past the ridge to the edge of a dry creek bed. And there, carved into the stone, were words that shouldn't have survived the years: justice never ends. It waits. No one knows who carved it, or when. But the prospector never came back. His campfire was found still burning, his mule tethered and restless, his footprints leading straight toward that same ridge, and stopping where hers had vanished. The story starts to sound familiar then, doesn't it? A town built on theft, a woman erased, a reckoning written in dust. It's the same tale, over and over. The names change, the guns change, but the sins, they never do. So maybe the truth isn't buried at all. Maybe it's just waiting for the next fool to dig it up. Maybe that fool is you. And if you're still here, still listening, it's already too late to pretend you didn't hear her name. Don't make her wait. Subscribe now, before the wind carries it to your door, before you find her footprints outside your window. But if you won't, if you think you can ignore her, then go on. Head to the comments. Explain why you didn't. Just know, once her story finds you, it never lets go. Because history doesn't end, friend. It only starts again, with someone who thought they were safe. When the dust finally settled, the town didn't vanish. It just went quiet. The saloon still stood, its windows long gone, its doors breathing in the wind. The church bell hung crooked, rusted through but heavy with memory. And on the hill, where the sheriff's house once stood, there's nothing but a patch of ground, where grass refuses to grow. Travelers still pass through sometimes. They don't stay long. The air feels too still, too watchful. They say it's sundown. The wind shifts and starts to move in circles, carrying the faint sound of boots on wood and a woman's breath, close enough to feel but never to see. The locals won't meet your eyes when you ask about it. They'll just nod toward the old fence at the edge of town, where badges hang nailed to the posts, their metal eaten dull by rust. No one put them there. No one dares take them down. There's a grave too, out beyond the ridge. No marker, no name, just a pile of stones that always looks freshly turned, though no one's touched it in years. On still nights, the sand around it ripples, as if something beneath it still stirs. Her story lives on in whispers now, told by men who never met her, rattled by women who feel like they've known her all their lives. They argue over whether she was a killer or a savior, a ghost or just a woman who'd had enough. But the land doesn't argue. The land remembers. It's written her story in silence, in wind, in the long shadow that stretches over what used to be called justice. The West moves on, pretending she's gone, pretending it learned. But under the sun-bleached boards and dry wells, her echo lingers, steady as a heartbeat, patient as time. Because legends don't die, they wait for someone to listen. And when they do, when they lean close enough to hear, they'll find the same truth buried beneath every story this land ever told. By dawn, they found him face down in the dust, his badge missing, his sins unburied, and the only footprints leading away were made by a woman's boots. They say the wind still carries her name, not loud, just a whisper, slipping between the mesquite and the bones of the town. Some hear it as a warning, others, a promise. But either way, it's always the same voice, calling from somewhere you can't quite find. The stories change each time they're told. In one, she rides at dusk with a veil over her face. In another, she waits by the dry well, lantern burning blue. But no one ever tells you why her story still moves through the desert, untouched by time. Maybe it's because the West never buries its ghosts. It just renames them, dresses them up in legend, and lets the living pretend they've forgotten. They say history belongs to the victors, but out here, the dead still speak, and their truths don't stay buried long. Every lawman, every preacher, every outlaw who thought they'd written the final word, they were wrong. Because she's still out there, somewhere between dust and memory, walking the edge of the stories men tried to erase. And if you listen close enough, when the night goes still, and the air feels heavy, you'll hear the faint rhythm of boots on the earth, slow and certain, heading your way. The West doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. It just waits for the next soul foolish enough to think the story's over. So don't look away now. Don't turn down the volume and pretend this was just a tale. Subscribe before her footsteps find your silence. Subscribe before the wind remembers your name too. And if you think you can outrun what's coming, then go on. Step into the comments. Try to explain why you didn't. Just know, those who talk too loud down there, the West has a way of answering back. Because legends like hers never die. They just keep walking, waiting for someone else to listen.